Assalamu alaikum guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to talk about radical rules that is a part of the quantitative section of the GAT or qudrat exam. So let's just get right into it and waste no time. So I want to show you guys that radicals are fractional exponents. How? So we know that the power of x, the radical of x, is the same thing as x to the power of 1 over 2. And so on and so forth. These are just examples that are further explaining it. So it's like a radical 3 to the radical of x is the same thing as x to the exponent of 1 to the third. And so on and so forth. So now that you have that in mind, let's move on. So let's move on to the radical rules. Rule number 1 is that n to the radical of a times b is the same thing as n to the radical of a multiplied by n to the radical of b. Now let me show you that through an example to further portray it. So let's say the n is the same thing as 3 and the a is 2 and then the b is 3. So let's plug it in. It's simply going to be 3 to the radical of 2 times 3, which is the same thing as 3 to the radical of 2 multiplied by 3 to the radical of 3. Which is the same thing. We know that this is going to equal 6 and so on and so forth. So we now proved rule number 1. Let's prove it through the exponential equivalent. So we know that we already have our key over here and we're going to use it now. So we know that 2 multiplied by 3 is the same thing. And then it's the same thing as 2 over 1 to the third multiplied by 3 over 1 to the third. This is a 3, excuse me, I don't know why I put 2. But yeah, since we have n as equal to 3, it's going to be 1 to the third. So we can prove that this is the same thing as this. They are interchangeable. They are equivalent to each other. So now we proved rule number 1, which is this is the same thing as this. Let's move on to rule number 2. So we have n to the power of a divided by b is the same thing as n to the radical of a divided by n to the radical of b. Now let us prove that. Let us prove the radical rule. So we're going to use the same numbers. So we're going to use n as 2 or like just around the regular root. So we're going to simply put 2 over 3. A is going to be 2, b is going to be 3, which is the same thing as 2 over 3, radical of 2 over radical of 3. Now we prove this point. Let us prove the exponential equivalent. It says that 2 over 3 is the same. So it's saying that this is the same thing as this. Or this, same thing. They're all the same thing. Which is also this is the same thing as this. Since we said we are using it as 2, so the exponential equivalent is 1 over 2. And now we proved that this equals this and this equals this. And this. So the exponential equivalent equals the radical rule. Now let's move on to our the third rule. So basically these are equivalent to each other, it just changes in order. Now let's prove it through an example. Let's say that n equals 3, b equals 2, and m equals 4. Now let's just plug it in. 3 to the root of 2 over 4, or I mean exponent of 4 is the same thing as 3 root of 2, and then you close it, and then it's going to be 4. So now we proved this and this. Now let's prove the exponential equivalent. So let's plug in the same numbers, just 2, 4, and then 1 over third is the same thing as 2 to the power of 4 over 3, which is equal to 2 over 1, and then all over 4. Now what we simply did was have our key and plug in the numbers in order to prove these rules, that are equal to each other. Now this is the radical rule and this is the exponential equivalence. I think it would help greatly if you do refer back to, I don't know what I just wrote, exponents. If you refer back to the exponents rule video, that would really help, and I encourage that. Now let's move on to our fourth rule. So our fourth rule states that nq to the radical of b is the same thing as n to the radical of q to the radical of b. Now let's see what that means. It means that let's plug in 6 here, and then radical. Oh no, that's not a radical, guys. And the radical of 3 is the same thing as 2 times 3. Radical of 3 is the same thing as 3 over 2 over 3, or radical. So what this is that there are just called nested radicals. They're just under each other. Radical over radical over radical, which is 2 to the radical of 3 to the radical of 3. Now we proved that this is the same thing as this. Now let us prove the exponential equivalent. And we're going to do it down here because of space. And I'll change the color just so the eye can differentiate. So we said that 3 over 1, 6 is equal to 3, 1 over 2 multiplied by 1 over 3, which is the same thing as 3 over 1, 2. Now we don't forget the brackets, and then 1 over 3rd. Now we have, it's going to be, the final answer is going to be 3, 1/3, brackets, 1 over 2. Now we have proved that this is equal to this is equal to this, so they are all equal. Now we are done. I hope that the radical rules are more clear now that you know the radical rules to multiply and divide radicals in algebra, which it makes it easier for you to simplify radical expressions. Please don't hesitate to email me, wizworksyt@gmail.com, if you do have any more questions or suggestions. This is WizWorks. See you guys in the next video.